and also her colleague, Associate Professor Ceridwen from Global and Language Studies, Global, Urban and Social Studies, RMIT University, Melbourne, Australia. All right, for your information, this webinar is jointly organized by the Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainable Development, IBSD, and the Office of Deputy Vice Chancellor, Research and Innovation, UITM. The aim of this webinar is to provide an intellectual discourse to discuss on higher education and sustainable development goals. For today, we're going to focus on goal number 5, which is gender equality. As we know, one of the SDG aims is to ensure equal access for all women and men to affordable and quality technical, vocational and tertiary education, including university, by 2030. And SDG further aims to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. For this reason, we provide a platform for sharing session for panelists to share their thoughts on gender equality issue in higher education, perspectives from Malaysia, Australia, Ethiopia, and Papua New Guinea. All right, we're about to begin the webinar. But before that, I would like to highlight a few reminders to all participants. Please mute your microphone during the session. You may raise your question during the Q&A at the end of the session, or you may write your question of concern in the chat box for the panels to respond. I will prioritize the question and comments from the audience, so please use this opportunity to get feedback from the panelists. And at the end of the session, please fill in your detail for attendance record. We will also provide the attendance link using the WebEx extension. Okay, let's begin the webinar with our first panel, Professor Dr. Faizah Abdul Majid. And before that, allow me to read Professor Dr. Faizah's brief information. Dr. Faizah Abdul Majid is a professor in adult and higher education at Faculty of Education, UITM. Currently, she serves as the Director of Academic Development and Management at the Institute of Continuing Education and Professional Studies, iCEPS. She has received both international and national research grants and published in various index journals and book chapters, all within the areas of adult and higher education, TESOL, and professional development. Besides training pre- and in-service teachers, Professor Dr. Faizah is a master trainer in Malaysian Higher Education Leadership Academy, ACAP, in which she develops modules and facilitates the professional growth of fellow academics across the nation. In this regard, she concentrates on the scholarship of teaching and learning. In terms of networking, Professor Dr. Faizah has been appointed as an academic assessor by both international and national ministries and higher education institutions. She has also been invited as keynote speakers in several international conferences and of late series of webinars. Based on her involvement and achievement in the field of adult education, Professor Dr. Faizah was awarded the Distinguished Scientist in Adult Education by Venice International Foundation based in India in 2019. Please welcome our first panel, Professor Dr. Faizah, to share her thoughts on the Venusian conquest in higher education. The virtual podium is yours, Prof.
Alhamdulillah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And a very, very good morning to everybody. And in this regard, let me extend my heartfelt gratitude to IBSD for this opportunity. And of course, our beautiful moderator this morning, Associate Professor Dr. Yarina. Thank you for such a sweet gesture from you introducing me and a little background on what I do in the academic world. I am more than flattered actually to be sharing this platform with Associate Professor Dr. Yarina and the other three speakers, respectively, from Ethiopia, Papua New Guinea, and Australia. I look forward to a fruitful presentation from the other three, and I really look forward to providing you with my insights on what I have observed and what I have, my thoughts on equality amongst the ladies or the female academics in higher education. Okay, without further ado, I suppose it's all right for me to share the screen at the moment, and please give me a few seconds to do that. All right. Okay, I'm just checking with you guys. You could see my screen, yeah? Can I hear some? Yes, okay.
Yes, Prof.
All right, alhamdulillah. All right, to begin with, this is the title that I thought of the moment Dr. Yarina communicated with me and asked whether I could give a talk or share my thoughts and my personal observation on gender equality in higher education. Immediately, I thought of a book which I came about some years ago, and I'm sure this book is something which is also read up by others, yeah, not just me. It's entitled "Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus," and I like to start on this ground saying that here I am, standing tall, representing all the female academics we have in higher education, not just in YTM, not just in Malaysia, but in the whole wide world, that we are not here to compare, but we are here to complement. And I'm sure vice versa, from the male perspective, having the female academics as colleagues, it's not about competing, but it's actually complementing. And what I have next is, actually what we have from John Gray, who is actually the author of that book, Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus, when he claimed, when men and women are able to respect and accept their differences, then love has a chance to blossom. And in this regard, I see love as in the big perspective. It's not just about that romantic feelings that we have for each other, but the love here is where we cherish and we celebrate the differences that we have, and how this celebrating the differences that we have can actually complement our strength, and hence we move towards a better world whereby we see there is this opportunity to learn from each other. And in this regard, I say each other, I'm referring to the male and female. So please allow me to begin my talk on the basis that we are all here equal. We are all here with differences, but those differences are what make us stronger, inshallah. Okay, so what do I have in mind for the next, an hour or so that I have been given the time to share my personal thoughts and observation? I suppose it's all right for me to share with you some of my personal background, not because I wanted to blow my own, but it's very much of me trying to tell you why I am here at the first place, and why I do what I do, and why me, being a woman who is able to be where she is. I started with a humble beginning, and I try to still be humble, because and of course in our own afterlife, and here, after sharing with you my personal background, I hope to share my thoughts on the power of the Venusians. And please pardon me, the word Venusians is actually, if you check it on the Oxford Dictionary, you may not find it. It's actually a term which I term it, I coin it simply because I thought, well, since John Gray claimed that women are from Venus, so let's just celebrate that idea and say that, okay, we are the Venusians. So here we are. I hope to share with you my thoughts on the power of Venusians. But of course, when I claim the power of Venusians, I actually refer to some religious perspective as well as cultural perspective, inshallah. And then, since I am in the education faculty, it's only wise for me to share my thoughts on where are the girls, where are the women when it comes to education. And when we talk about education, yes, we can talk about education in general, but later on, I'm going to zoom in into talking about higher education. when we talk about, at the university or the post-secondary perspective, education. And to share with you also some of the facts and figures that were thrown to us by relevant reports. And in this instance, I'm going to share with you some of the global reports as well as the national reports that actually concern about the place of women or girls in the country as well as in the world. And having given all those facts from those reports, I would like to share with you what we actually know from our personal observation, what you actually know on top of all those reports or the survey that was done and the reports that was shared with us. But what do we actually know? The observation that we have done. And hopefully at the end, I'd like to conclude this presentation with some way forward. Very simply put, the way forward that I have in mind is actually some interesting insights that we have from some remarkable women leaders in the world. Yeah. Okay, here we go. All right, thank you, Associate Professor Dr. Yarina. You actually introduced me from where I was in higher education, but my humble beginning of an educator began in 1993 when I graduated with a Bachelor of Education with honors in TESOL. So I was a school teacher in 1993. Okay, you can start calculating my age. I was 23 at that point. Yeah, I was an English language teacher, very young, very yuppie, and in a way greenhorn nonetheless, because it was my first job. But when I started teaching, SDF, Sekolah Tun Fatimah, is actually one of the boarding school. Yeah, it's one of an elite school that we have in the country. It's a school where all the the talented girls. They are all girls school were sent to. They were selected. People don't apply to go to boarding school in Malaysia, special boarding school in Malaysia like SDF. They were selected based on good results. So I considered myself very lucky to be sent to an all-girls school. Being a 23-year-old at that time, I said, I'm not kind of confident to deal with boys, in the class. But that was what I was then, being young at 23, and that was my first job. However, upon teaching there for some 2 years, I felt there's something missing. It's like I don't really feel like teaching school children. I feel like helping teacher educators. I want to help those to become better teachers, because from my observation across Malaysia, the teachers are always in dire need to become better. And that explains why my motto is that you are only a teacher the moment you realize you're always a learner. That is actually from Robert Mihan, who says that if you want to become a teacher, you need to realize that you're always a learner before you can become a good one. Then I realized, okay, maybe that is where my forte is. So I left school to pursue my higher education, and hence ended up teaching in higher learning institution. So my academic life in YTM started in 1997 upon me coming back from the UK with my master's in TEFL, Masters of Arts in TEFL. So I came in 1997. I was still carrying the notion of teaching English language, and I was really enjoying teaching, and students, the classroom, and me. That was the center of the universe for me. There was no promotion at the back of my mind. There was no thinking about what would I be, climbing the ladder up. When we talk about leadership, having positions that would enable me to make important decisions for the faculty or for the university was never in my mind until 2006, close to 10 years after I came back from my PhD. I was enlightened by the fact that, hey, hang on a minute, you're not just here to teach your students, you are here to contribute. You need to be able to help the university to become a better university. And in that regard, it's also an opportunity for you to help develop the nation in the capacity that you are good at, in the sense that teaching. So hence, I realized in order to do that, I need to have that credibility. I need to be recognized. So hence, it took me a while to understand how important it is for me to start thinking about promotion, career promotion, and in this regard is the senior lecturership. So I only applied, and alhamdulillah, I got it the first time in 2006 as a senior lecturer. It took me close to 10 years. Then I learned my lesson. It says that, okay, hang on a minute. You're not just here to teach, Faiza. You are here to contribute. You need to realize the impact that it could give to the university, the impact that it could give to the nation. It's not just about you and your groups of students. It's about you and the nation. And hence I realized, okay, so in order to do that, you need to have that license. And what I mean by license? That credibility. So I learned my lesson well and applied, I applied for my associate professorship in 2009, and alhamdulillah, I got it. And ever since then, I love what I do. There's also another tagline of mine: I do what I love what I do. And less than about 6 or 7 years, I applied for a full professorship, and alhamdulillah, I was appointed in January 2017. Again, I'm saying this not because I want to show about, all the external perks that come with it. I'm talking about the impact that I could, a woman like me, could give to the faculty, could give to the university, could give to the nation, to the country, when I have this credibility, So that is why it's very important for us to understand that we are able to become leaders, but however to become leaders, we need to start on the right ground. We need to have with us the relevant equipment and tools, and by this I mean the recognition of the university of your capability. So that is why it's very important for all academics here to understand why it is important for us to go for senior lecturership, associate professorship, and eventually a full professorship. All right, so as an academic leader, it started upon me coming back from my PhD in 2004. So upon coming back, the faculty was expanding, and we had our postgraduate program, started some 2 or 3 years before I came back from my PhD, and the faculty needed a coordinator for the Masters in Education TASL. So coming back with a PhD, at that point of time, there weren't many PhD holders. I suppose the opportunity just, rolled on to my lap. So the dean at that point of time asked whether I could assist. Then I said, of course, coming back from a PhD, I'm all, very hot-blooded, I got a lot of ideas, a lot of things to do, being young at that point of time still. So I was appointed the coordinator, and really, I felt so good about it, not because I have that authority, full stop, but because I have the authority to make changes, to make decisions. And alhamdulillah, some of the things that I did way back in 2004 as the coordinator, and then later as a head of department when the postgraduate programs got bigger, because we've got more programs besides Masters in Education TASL. We've got, educational management, and then PhD, and then later we've got our math education, Masters of Science in Math Education. So what is happening now, I know it also started from when I was the first coordinator and became the head of department. So some of the things, the changes I did, some of the decisions that I helped make for the faculty under the leadership of the dean and the deputy deans at that time, it's actually fruiting. It's actually showing that was some of the things that we did, and it's happening now. And I could sit back, relax, and look at it and say, alhamdulillah, those are the things that I was once involved in making decisions, So as a woman, I didn't feel disadvantaged just because I'm a woman. I realized that, okay, you come in, you've got this strength, you've got these ideas, nothing is stopping you. The opportunity just came rolling on into my lap, and I said, take it, seize the opportunity. So alhamdulillah, I suppose the faculty saw my talent, quote unquote, and I was appointed as the deputy dean in 2009, and I was looking at industry linkages and community network. And from then on, when I became the deputy dean, the surface becomes wider, or the landscape became wider. I was no more at the faculty level. I was exposed at the university level when there were meetings with the deputy vice chancellor, when there were meetings with directors of respective department, and hence I suppose the opportunities made you visible, and I was appointed as the director under the deputy vice chancellor. At that level in 2013, then I realized, oh wow, I suppose this is my challenge now to show whether I'm still capable. I'm good at the faculty, but I just don't want to just be good at the faculty. Am I still capable to help the university when I am now under the leadership of the deputy vice chancellor as her director? So alhamdulillah, I suppose I did quite well because in 2017, the deputy vice chancellor of academic approached me and proposed the idea of me being one of the nominees for the dean of the faculty. So of course, I had to go through the process, interview and whatnot, and Alhamdulillah, the university, the Vice Chancellor appointed me as the Dean in 2017, and upon finishing my first term, I was appointed as the Director to where I am now in 2019. So why am I telling you this? It's not, again, I repeat, I try to be as humble as possible. It's not about bragging myself, but what I'm trying to say is that regardless whether we are a woman or whether we are a man, that's not an issue. The issue here is actually whether you have the capabilities and the confidence of, in your own capabilities. Nobody is stopping you, but you are given opportunities. But if you don't seize, you here, I'm talking to the ladies here, when you don't seize that opportunity, you don't, you don't rise to the occasion, then there is no one else to blame. So you have been spotted, opportunities have been given, you have shown, you have proved your abilities, and you are given that opportunity to show more, to prove more. So again, from my humble beginning to where I am still now, I think I'm still learning, and I always kept in mind, I'm always a learner. There's always something new that I could learn, and there's nothing stopping me from going further, unless I want to be my own enemy. So here, what I'm trying to say here is that in YTM, a lot of faculties are female dominated. But it does not necessarily mean that when we are female dominated, the faculties are female dominated, female will own the leadership. Not necessarily. Again, it goes back to your capability. Nothing to do about us being a woman, or nothing to do about someone else is a man and we are not a man. All right. So here, whatever that I've mentioned here, it brings me to my final point on this slide, where I said the moral of the story is that you need to be seen, to be spotted, and to be seen, you have to have the opportunities. So when the opportunities are given, you need to rise to the occasion. There is no one stopping you except yourself. So that's the easiest way that I could start with it. Okay, now enough about me. Let's go back. Let's go to the second point that I want to share with you. So where are us Venusians? Where's our power? So let me share with you some of the Islamic perspective, and I think Islamic perspectives, the Islamic value is quite universal, regardless of what religion we embrace. I suppose these are the things which can come in quite easily to be understood. Where are the women in Islam? Okay, Islam has placed paradise under the feet of women the moment they become mothers. I'm a mother, alhamdulillah. I have 3 children, 2 boys, and the youngest is a girl, 23 years old, the eldest one, 18 years old this year, the second one, and the youngest is 16. So I'm so glad when I was brought up with this ideal perspective in Islam, saying that the moment a woman becomes a mother, Islam has placed paradise under her feet. Now let's look at it not literally, figuratively. So what it means here is that children need to respect the mothers, because there is a special place in Islam for all mothers, because it's not just about us carrying them in our womb. It's not just about us giving birth to them, fighting against our life to give birth to our children. It's not just about us raising them, the moment they were born up to when they become independent themselves and have their own family. It's not just about that. It's actually the values that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has actually given to the women, because men has always been seen as the imam in the family, as the imam in the society. Women is never seen as an imam. It's always the man as an imam. But when it comes to paradise, entering the paradise, even Rasulullah SAW said, there's this one friend of him asked him, Ya Rasulullah, between a father and a mother, who should I, prioritize? And you know what the answer that Rasulullah said? It's actually your mother, your mother, your mother, your mother, 3 times before he said it's your father. So here it says that, wow, even at that point of time, I'm talking about as a mother, you are the leader. It's always a leader where the followers, you're only a leader when you are a leader, but what are you as a leader if you don't have followers here? So in this instance, followers, we're not talking about that slave kind of connotation, but the followers who look at you in admiration, who look at you as the role model, who look at you as the support, what do you call what it's like a reservoir of love and strength that will support and facilitate the development and the growth of the respective child. So that is why Islam has placed women in such a beautiful position. And then, not just to the children, mothers became the reason why fathers would enter paradise. So this is interesting. Earlier on, I mentioned about men are the imam in the family, men are the imam in the society, in the community, in the country. But then again, no man can enter paradise unless there is this mother that has blessed her son. So that is the reason why fathers, a gentleman out there, I'm not really, quite, what do you call that, knowledgeable in this regard. But what I know is that when I was raised with this belief, it's like no matter how big you are, no matter how strong you are, no matter how powerful or the authority given upon you because of the position that you hold, nothing can beat you and your mother. In this instance, I'm talking to the man, right? So if you are good, but you are not good to your mom, I don't think the paradise door will be able to open for you. So that is what it means here in the Islamic perspective, number 2. And the third one, women as wives. Wow, this is interesting, yeah? When we are married, it is important for the husband to honor the wife in such a way that if that is done wrongfully, the door of paradise will also be difficult to be open for him. So what I'm trying to say is that we wives who made such an integral part of a husband's faith, that without honoring his wife, his faith will remain incomplete. So that is why Rasulullah did say, a man is not complete unless he is married. So why is that so? Yeah. So then you can understand. Wow, this is this power, quote unquote, of us, the Venusians, from the Islamic perspective. Okay, moving on from the cultural perspective, let me share with you from the Eastern perspective, and I suppose it's also from the Western perspective too. Some of what I'm about to say is quite generic because we also saw that in our observation when we go abroad. And we may also have friends who are in a different culture, but they may also share the same motion, like what I'm about to say here. Number 1, women's role is oriented more towards family matters rather than self-fulfillment. I could vouch for this because I'm a woman, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a daughter to an ailing mother, and I agree that there were many times when I was at work, and there were times when I feel I have success, a lot of things, milestones have been reached. But if I do not feel my family shares the same feeling like I do, I don't think I have really feel satisfied. So here in this instance, maybe some of you would share with me, maybe some of you would have a different perception. Yes, it's a free country. We are free to have our own opinion. But I strongly believe in this. Our role is more oriented towards family, regardless of what position we have at work. And whatever success we have at work, it's not as meaningful as it could be unless it is also shared and felt by the family. So in this regard, let me talk about me. Let me talk about me. I can only feel satisfied with what I do at work in UiTM in this regard. Whatever success I have, I come back and share that with my husband. If only my mom could understand. My mom is now suffering from dementia. It's quite critical. She has actually lost memories, and there were instances where I know she did not recognize me. But she was still healthy then. One of the things that I felt like quickly coming back home is to tell these success stories I have from work with my mom and with my husband. And of course now with my children, now that they are entering adulthood and they could understand our responsibilities. So, but if I can't share that with my family, I do not feel enough. I do not feel, that self-fulfillment is not there. So I suppose many of you would share the same sentiment with me. Yeah? And when we talk about family, even if you're not married, there is still family. Right? We're talking about your parents, we're talking about siblings, we're talking about your nephews and nieces, who you are the role model to. So these are the things that I think us ladies need to realize. Yeah? And number 2, now this is zooming into the Malay culture. One thing about Malay culture, there was a research done by Cuthbert and friends in 2008. Yeah, I admit this is about more than 10 years old. But when I saw this salient finding from this report, and I said, hey, it's still relevant, I can vouch, I do feel the same. And I have actually read some of the works of Associate Professor Dr. Madeline Verma. She's from UKM, yeah? And also from Professor Datuk Dr. Nurzaini, who is the chairperson of Pendapat, an association for policy in higher education. If you Google them, they have also written something on leadership. And Madeline Verma, for instance, she spoke specifically on women and in the Eastern culture. So they actually share. I'm so sorry I didn't get the references from that, but I was just reading that before we came to this talk today. Then I realized, oh, it's still happening now. You know what Cuthbert and friends discovered in 2008. They claim that when there is this dilemma between the modern challenges of life and tradition, women actually felt that. You know why? I suppose it goes back to what was said earlier. Our role is always oriented towards family, and that is why I in my case also, it's always family first. You know, it's always family first, and it's important for me to have the blessing of my husband. And now that I'm married, so I'm under his guardian, it's very important for me to get the blessing from my husband, who allows me to do what I do. And without his blessing, I feel like every step that I take to go to work and every step I take to go to meetings and make important decision for the university, I thought that am I on the right path here when I am not, you know, blessed by my husband. But Alhamdulillah, my husband has been very supportive of my work so far. He knew me first when I was a teacher, so he still know me as someone who loves teaching and devoted her life to teaching and helping teachers to become better teachers. Alhamdulillah, I think one of the articles you read that talk about attributes, these are the words, these are the adjectives that you will see, you know. But and these are the things which are stronger amongst the women compared to the men. All right. So I didn't just say it. Yeah, this is actually from the literature. So we have that, you know, nurturance. I suppose it's the DNA that God, Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, has actually, you know, engraved the you know, versus the has more emotion. So I suppose that's why John Gray also say, you know, men of Mars and women of Venus. But again, if you recall what I said earlier, these differences of ours do not make us competitors. These differences of ours make us complement each other. That we together, when we work as a team, we make better decisions and we make the world a better place to live in. All right. So you can actually see the you know, around the circle of all those ladies. You know, the reference will be the Nobel Laureates recipients. Yeah, the Nobel Laureates. So up until 2019, this is from my research recently. It is interesting to note, yeah, there were many prizes given at the Nobel Laureates, and so far, out of there have been 866 men and 24 organizations who were the Nobel Laureates. But there's only 53 Nobel Laureates. I'm just throwing this idea to you. I'm just picking on your brain with these facts. Okay, now the distribution of that 53, the 53 women, who were they? 17 were given the Nobel Laureate in Peace Prize, you know. But did you know? Meaning 17 ladies and the rest were men, and organization, 12.6%. Now in literature, out of 117, making it at 13.7. But I thought we are sensitive. We are, you know, you've got that flair towards emotion and feelings. And so literature it's about, you know, literature is about appraisal of written literary works, you know. But 16 out of 117, question mark, what happened there? Okay, 12 in physiology or medicine, you know, out of 222, 7 in chemistry out of 186, 4 in physics out of 216, and 2 the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Sciences, you know, out of 84. So here, there's a trend there, right? You can see where this is heading. Okay, in this instance, I'm actually showing you some facts and figures here, telling us that we have opportunities yet to be reaped. So I suppose women leaders out there. You know, we're talking about all the giant women that we have in the industry in Malaysia. You know, let's just zoom into our country first in Malaysia. Industry, not just industry, even in higher education, we do have some, you know, leaders, you know, iconic women leaders in higher education, you know. So they could be, you know, looking, you know, some facilitation and some support could be given so that more women are awarded the Nobel Laureates, and could be one from Malaysia. Okay, in terms of education, let me share with you some of the you know, facts that I obtained from my library research or from my literature review. I'm sure you are familiar with Malala, you know, such a tragic thing that happened to her, but all because she wanted to advocate education for girls, you know, something to do with the Taliban, where they actually seized opportunity for the girls to go to school. But this lady, she was very young. She was a little girl at that point of time. Holding the flag, she ran towards the Taliban, who were actually holding rifles and pointing at her. But she was not afraid at all, because she wanted to prove that it is important to let the girls go to school. Of course, she was shot, and God has deemed it that Alhamdulillah, she is still alive, and she became that icon when it comes to advocated education for the girls. And Fatima Al-Fihri, some of you know better than I do about Fatima Al-Fihri. Yeah? Apparently, this is many, in fact, more than a century ago. Yeah? Fatima Al-Fihri used her inheritance to actually, turn a mosque into a university. And it was claimed as the oldest university, or rather oldest higher learning institution, Fatima Al-Fihri. And then, of course, Samira Musa is another name. If you Google, you know, successful women in education, Samira Musa would be another name that you might talk into. Right? Who is she? She's the first female Egyptian nuclear scientist. So she is one of those ladies who actually penetrated the field which is very much dominated by men. So the first academic also in the University of Cairo. Now, when we talk about those ladies, you know, the iconic ladies in education, and just now I mentioned about that Nobel laureate, then it came to me thinking that, what about education? Yeah? There might be a prize given to iconic figures in education, and the closest that I came that was claimed to be at par with Nobel Prize is actually the Global Teacher Prize. You know? The Global Teacher Prize, these are the winners. What I could get is the one from 2015 up to 2020. I suppose because it started in 2015. The first four from 2015, 16, 17, and 18, they were ladies. They are ladies. 2019 and 2020, the recipients are men. So at least this is something nice to look at. You know, 4 out of 6 recipients since 2015 are the ladies. So yeah, in a way, it's dominated. It's not about comparing again. But what I'm trying to say is that we do have, you know, recognized education among the ladies. I'm happy to see this. But that is at global. Let's come back to our country in Malaysia. Of course, in Malaysia, our best reference would be the Anugerah Akademik Negara, you know, the National Academic Awards. So here, I could, but it will be very complicated, because each year they have different criteria, you know, so they don't have similar criteria from the first award up to the latest. So that is why you see the denominator numbers are different, because it depends on the criteria they have for the respective year. So what I want to draw your attention to is to look at the years where there is 0, 0, 0, 0. Okay, the zeros are actually representing ladies. Okay, the number over the denominator is female AAN winners. So you can see that in the first time around 2006, out of 4 criteria, 2 criteria were given, 2 prizes were given to the ladies. But then there was none in the second year. There was none in the third year. There was none in the fourth year. Then I said, "Yo, what happened?" Yeah, it's like there's no ladies who applied or who were nominated, because remember I said earlier you need an opportunity. So the opportunity is that whether you were nominated or you actually applied. But to be nominated, you need to appear. You need to apply first, because it goes the screening towards AAN started with the university's nomination. So I suppose that could just be one of the reasons would be that not many women applied at the first place. And when there were less women who applied, there were less opportunity to be nominated. When there were less opportunity to be nominated at the faculty level or university level to go to the ministry level, of course the number of female applicants will by far be very little to the men. So I suppose that could be the reason. But then again, what I want to show to highlight to you is that why are we not grabbing that? Nobody's stopping us. Anybody can apply. There is no criteria saying that you must be a man to apply for AAN. All right. And again, but then the numbers started to grow again in the 5th year. However, in the 11th year, there's also 0 female recipient. All right. So that is something to pick your brain on here. Now, the next notion that I want to share with you is some facts. Okay. That I would like to share with you with regard to girls, women, and education, and in this regard, higher education. So these facts did not come from me. It was not a research which I conducted. Again, most of the things that I mentioned here is actually personal observation, personal thoughts, and also my own reference, my own research that I did. Yeah. So there was a research done by Taylor Pittman. She actually works for under the Morgan project. So this research is among the latest, was done in late 2019 and it was released in the middle of 2020. So what you see on this screen is reflective of findings from Malaysia. Now, what you see as the first fact that I'd like to share with you is with regard to literacy rate. It is true the literacy rate between boys and girls is still unequal. Yeah. You can see there, nation 94%, the Malaysia's percentage across Malaysia, 94% of literacy rate. And from that, in other words, there were 6% who are still illiterate among the children that we have here. And the sadder part is the fact that the girls, there were only 93.2 versus the boys 96.2%. So in other words, parents were not sending their girls to school. In other words, if I may put that in a very simple term. So it is sad to know, this is still happening. Although we are talking about in the 21st century, those parents would be, the generation which were already gone through the era where education has always been number one in this country. Okay, stereotyping. Okay, I do have a student who actually did her master's with me, and she actually researched this. She actually looked at the content of the textbook in Malaysia and looked at the stereotyping of genders in the textbook in Malaysia. And true enough, there is actually elements of stereotyping in the textbook. And when I see, Pittman reported this, there is stereotyping in gender, I agree because I also saw that from my master students' research. And numbers, in terms of numbers, there are more boys in secondary school, not primary, secondary school. But having said there are more boys at secondary school, there are also more boys drop out. In fact, 3 times more likely to happen amongst dropouts amongst boys and girls. When it comes to performance, this is interesting to know, but I think this is quite general understanding. The girls perform better at primary than secondary school, simply because of the teaching tactics and the gender stereotyping in the respective school level, the primary as opposed to the secondary. And then when we talk about secondary school, the number of girls in the secondary school has risen to a much greater percentage. In 1947, when we first there were only 33% girls who actually managed to enter secondary school. But however, in 2018, there were 75% girls. So the number is increasing. But I don't understand why can't we have 100%. So that tells something about education in Malaysia. There is still access being denied or access not being, the opportunity was not, taken up by the parents. It's not about the children, it's always the parents. What happened to the parents sending their children to school? That is something which is worth for us to explore and understand further. Okay, in terms of disparity, all right, when we talk about university now, there is still gender disparity. Later, I'm going to share with you some of the facts we have in the YTM about female and male students. But what we have here is that there is gender disparity in the universities, and most likely there are more girls than boys, or there are more female than male in the universities among students, yeah, except for UPNM. And UPNM is that National Defence University, yeah, if I get it right in English, UPNM, University Pertahanan National Malaysia National Defence University. So the students who enter UPNM, they are meant to serve the armed forces. You know, some of them are actually sponsored, or they are given scholarship under respective armed forces. So most likely you can imagine why there is a disparity in other universities, but in UPNM there are more boys than the girls. It's quite understood why. Yeah? Okay, in terms of higher education, 62% women are in higher learning institution, and I'm happy to announce earlier. I'm going to show it to you later. This statistic, 62%, is also quite reflective of what we have in the IDM. I'll talk about it now. Okay, across Malaysia, women in higher education, 62% women. So it's more than 50%. So there are more women in higher education. Yeah. However, despite the fact that there are more women in higher education, there's still gender gap when it comes to STEM discipline, you know, science, technology, engineering, discipline. It's still dominated by the men. Of course, our ministries have always been supportive. In fact, there are policies and there are incentives given to encourage more girls into taking up STEM discipline. Okay, in terms of leadership, there is an absence of women in leadership position, despite that 62% women in higher education, yeah, or recruitment in higher education. And when I share with you ITM case study, this is also true. This is also reflective, right? I'm already, jumping the gun here before I actually show you the slide. I'm already telling you it's quite similar also in ITM. Now, when it comes to women and STEM, if you remember earlier, I mentioned about how our government is very supportive of STEM, regardless of whether you are man, woman, boys, or girls. There is this special Malaysia woman policy in 2009 to encourage more women in policy. And there is also this national policy on science, technology, and innovation in 2013 to 2020, which has some, support to encourage ladies, the girls and the women. Okay, we've been talking about Malaysia at large, but what is Malaysia in terms of its composition? So here I have this from the Department of Statistics Malaysia. If you go to the website, you will see this figure. You will see this illustration, in fact. So as we know, there is 32.7 million Malaysians, population in this year, in which 3 million are actually the non-citizen, 29.7 million are the citizen. The one in maroon is actually from the year before. The one in green is actually from 2020. Yeah? So with regard to that population, let's look at by gender. So you see here, sex ratio is 106 male per 100 female. In other words, in Malaysia, there are more men than women. There are more boys than girls. Because of the sex ratio, but it is not that far, that big a gap, yeah, not that bad compared to other countries actually. So if you look at the population by age group, you will notice that the percentages are there. You can see that the one in green again is for the year 2020. The one in maroon is for the year 2019. So you can see the population by age group. The biggest is actually the productive age, yeah? The 15 to the 64 years. I'm not saying that 64 is productive, but I'm trying to, you know what I mean. The 22.8 million or 69.7% comprise, our population comprise of those who are between 15 and 64. So by race or ethnic group, you can see it on the side. I'm just sharing this with you because I imagine there are also audience who like to know more about what the country is made of in terms of the citizens and the non-citizens. So what we were made to know, I'm sure you have heard this many times, the government has always been in the idea of increasing the numbers of women in positions which make important decision making and really make a difference to the organization. So in view of the need to encourage equality, there is this policy. So this policy is under the Ministry of Women, Family and Community Development, where it states that 30% of decision-making positions are for the women. So our government has always been supportive of this. In fact, it's part of their target, to have more leaders. And the KPI is, as mentioned there, at least to have 30%. And when it comes to higher education, with regard to applying to enroll in higher education in the universities in Malaysia, there is no, there is no privileges given whether you are a boy or whether you are a girl. The merits, we go by merits and not by discrimination. And when it comes to the academic results or the academics at higher education, so when they want to apply for promotion, there is also no discrimination whether you are a man or woman. The criteria, the promotion criteria is very transparent, and there are committees that look into the application processes before it goes into the final stage, which is the interview with the top management. And I think it is quite transparent criteria, and nothing that actually could be a disadvantage to first ladies. And the thing about that 30% target, I'm very pleased indeed to come across this article from the Malay Mail dated, it's actually last year, on the 6th of March. You can actually Google and you may find this article, 6th of March 2020, about a year, close to a year ago. The survey states that Malaysia has actually surpassed the global percentage. Global percentage is 29%, but Malaysia has 33% of senior management teams comprising the ladies, right? So, but interesting to note, if you look at the fourth point that I have there, the top 3 senior management positions that comprise ladies, 52% of them are actually human resource directors. So I suppose we are good at managing staff, we are good at managing people, and chief financial officers 29%, and chief operating officers 28%. So this is what's happening in Malaysia. I think the target to get 30% of women in positions involving modern decision making it's a beautiful fact that we know we have actually surpassed the global percentage, and we have actually surpassed the 30%. However, as I dig further, it's interesting to know what Malaysia is like as opposed to the global. Then I realized, hang on a minute, there might be that report that talks about the global gender gap index, and I'm so happy to stumble into this report in the 2020 rankings. I'm sorry it's a bit small on your screen, but just look at the one that I have actually put a red box there. That is where Malaysia is. Out of 153 countries, we are placed, and Malaysia is placed at 104. So in terms of global gender gap index, we're talking about 33% of leaders, women leaders. Good to go. The first thing that made us happy this morning. But then again, when I came about with this figure, then I said, oh my goodness, we are at 104. And even worse, when I realized our neighboring countries, we're talking about Philippines, Philippines is not top 50, top 20. Philippines is ranked at number 16. It's over here. If I may move my cursor, it's over here. Philippines at 78.1%. We also have Indonesia at ranked at 85, 70%. Leaning about, we're talking about perfect number is 100%. So Indonesia 70%. We also have Vietnam 70%. And I think there's another one which is very interesting. We did see Indonesia, Vietnam, and Cambodia 89. So these are the neighboring countries around Malaysia, and these countries are doing better according to the global gender gap index, in terms of equality between men and women. So we are ranked at 104. And to dig further, why are we there when these countries are better off? So this is the reason. The Global Gender Gap Index framework includes 4 domains. The economic participation and opportunity, that's number 1. Educational attainment, that's number 2. Health and survival, that's number 3. And political empowerment, that's the 4th domain. So of the four domains, it's good to know education, we are ranked at 86 out of the 150 countries, top 100. In terms of health and survival, Malaysia is ranked at 84 out of 150 countries. But in terms, economic participation and opportunity, ranked at 97, still in a way top 100, but I wouldn't say top 100 is good because it's out of 153 countries. But what is very sad to know, the fourth domain, political empowerment, is ranked at 178 out of 150 countries at 0.18%, or rather 10%, meaning women in political empowerment. So again, I do not see this as a problem. I see this as a challenge which gave rise to opportunities. So there are ample opportunities for the women to go, because we need to break this. We need to change the statistic. We need to do something about it. We hear women, the women out there, the wonderful women that I'm talking to in particular at this point of time. There are rooms for us to penetrate more, the political empowerment as well as economic participation. Now, what do we actually know? I think I'm coming towards the end of my presentation. Slowly, if you have been following my talk based on my personal thoughts and observation, you will realize that there is nothing about you being a woman stopping you from holding important position, or rather to become the leaders of the institution. The Islam has put women as a leader when the three points I shared with you earlier was mentioned. They were mentioned. Paradise under our feet. Father cannot enter paradise without the blessing of his mother, and husband is incomplete without, if he doesn't honor his wife. So that is already in terms of spiritual understanding. But when it comes to leaders in organizations, in industries, or in higher education, there is no stopping us ladies from grabbing the opportunity. You need to be seen, you need to be spotted, and you need to be given the opportunity. And I think opportunities are given. I haven't heard, of my years in UiTM, I haven't heard of any top management mentioning that, they wanted a man compared to a woman to sit in position, to sit on the chair or hold a certain portfolio. What happened is actually, it's just rumors and it's just talks, nothing empirical, nothing based on evidence about male and female stereotyping for relevant top position. Somebody was saying, maybe this is academic, the ladies is better at it. This is academic, the man is better at it. I've never heard that. Again, I repeat myself, it's all about opportunities, and these opportunities is actually reflective of you, getting that opportunity. But then again, before you go get the opportunity, you need to understand the capabilities that you have. And to have that capabilities, you need to always learn, you need to always improve. The personal development must always be there. You must always be a learner, and you must always be able to seize to rise to the occasion. And having said that, now let's just look at the landscape of higher education in Malaysia. There have been female VCs. In the history of Malaysia, we have had in the past. In fact, some of them are still the VC of some universities in Malaysia. To name a few, USIM, University Science Islam Malaysia, UNT, University Malaysia Terengganu, USM, University Science Malaysia, UPM, and UTM, University Technical Malacca. So these are the universities that have the pleasure of having a female as their VC. So again, what I'm trying to say is that the opportunity is always there. But then again, to have that opportunity, you need to have that credibility. And to have that credibility, you need to, always have that confidence that you are able to do it. How do you get that confidence that you're able to do it? You're always a learner. You always improve yourself. You always renew the skill, upskill, reskill yourself. And when the opportunity is given, that is when you showcase, yes, you deserve to be there. You are that leader who was rightfully appointed. And you can still be a big, you can still be a leader regardless of what portfolio given to you, inshallah. So there is this breakthrough successful traits of women leaders that we need to understand. I want to bring you to UiTM, if you don't mind, because I do have some facts. In fact, some of them I've already mentioned earlier. So this is what we have in Malaysia, and congratulations to UiTM, among Asia's top university, top 17% of Asia's universities, and overall we are ranked at 108. That's a good fact, because we are a comprehensive university with more than 120 students and close to 18,000 staff, as opposed to other universities, which is smaller, much smaller in terms of population. So let me share with you some of my observation of Venusians in UiTM. So across the population, staff population we have in UiTM, some 9,000 of them comprise the admin, and 8,000, some 8,000 are the academics. And out of this 8,000, this is the latest, fresh from the toes, facts I've just obtained from my good friend who is in charge of statistics of the university, Professor Dr. Azura Makani. So according to her, we have 34% male academics and 66% female academics. So this is also reflective of what I mentioned earlier, the 62% female in higher education. So in UiTM, there are 66% female academics, and out of this 66% female academics, 62.1% of them are PhD holders. The male PhD holders, 38%. 62% PhD holders are female, 38% are male. So here, what I'm trying to say, the female still, there are more female PhD holders and there are more female academics. All right? And when we talk about academics, in terms of professors and full professors, we have some 201 professors, out of which about 43% of them are female. So you see, it's quite coming to that 50-50%. It's quite, you can see that. What I'm trying to tell you here is that the promotion criteria is transparent and there is no discrimination against gender. So, but you need to rise to the occasion. You hear the women, you need to go and do it. Nothing is stopping you. The only one thing that stops you is actually yourself. All right? And similar trend is also observed in the student ratio, female to male, 67 to 23. And this is also across the nation, like what I wanted just now. Now, how are we, as ladies, if I may slow down the stereotype attributes versus the successful attributes. Earlier on I shared with you some of the stereotype attributes of the women, and then when we compare to successful leaders, I'm going to show you the slide in a while. So these are the things that actually people will say that either this can be an advantage or disadvantage to you. But I always see this as an advantage because in our imperfection, we make perfect leaders. In us having assertiveness, we make perfect leaders. In us being able to empathize, we make perfect leaders. In us having that courage as a woman, we make perfect leaders. In us having that gratitude, we make perfect leaders. So what I'm trying to say is all the words that you see on the screen, the adjectives and the description that we have as stereotypical of a woman, take it as an advantage, take it as the pull or the push factor, the push factor that makes us a leader. Now, I want to share with you a Pew Research Center's findings, and this was conducted by them in 2017 in the US. But I think when I saw this, I thought, oh, maybe something interesting to share. What the community think at that point of time thought. This was done in 2017. What traits or characteristics do you think people in our society value? So what you see on the left column, these are what the society value most in men. They value honesty, professional, ambition, strength, hard work, and you can see the rest. But the top list, top in the list is honesty. But you look at what the society value in women, physical attractiveness, that's 35%. Empathy, nurturing, kindness, that's 30%. So you can see these two stereotypical, even the community is confirming that. That is what they value in women. And for men, what they value in men is honesty and professional. I'm just throwing these facts to you so that, maybe you can play with this data and come up with some certain hypotheses that could lead you to your future research. Allah Allah. So here is just a photo. I'm coming down to my closure. Just to admit, we agree Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made men and women the way we are. There are differences, but the differences do not make us competitors or strangers. The differences are actually what we need to embrace so that we complement each other and so that we make a stronger team. Here I'm talking about team. There's no just gender, women team, male team. No, it's a team that comprises men and women. So finding the balance, the feminine energy, the masculine energy, and if you go into this study, you will see this also popping up from the web, from the Google search. Yeah? So you can see all these values that we have and attributes that we have. Again, I'm repeating, the values are there for a reason. We need to honor, like what John Gray said, yeah? We need to accept the differences, and we need, by then, love will blossom. Remember, that was what I said, the first thing I said before I started the presentation. So, as a way forward, Michelle Obama, one of the greatest lady figures or icon that we have in the world, did say this, yeah? There is no limit to what we as women can accomplish. And she is actually, supported by what the previous, what others have said previously before her time, and also what they are saying now. So the first one, I have a very interesting quotation from Roseanne Barr, one of my favorite actresses. Yeah, the thing women have yet to learn is nobody gives you power. You just take it. So again, I think this coincides with what I said earlier. It's about us ladies having to go grab that opportunity. Nobody's stopping it. You go take it, And Helen Keller, who doesn't know Helen Keller? According to Helen Keller, she said, optimism is the faith that leads to achievement. So it begins with you. And how does it begin with you? It starts from the very faith and optimism that you have. Yeah? And there's Jamie Ferguson saying, don't let being a woman hold you back from the leader that you are destined to be. And I really like what Kathleen Shepard said. Leadership is not about men in suits. It's a way of life for those who know who they are and are willing to be best to create the life of one. Here, Kathleen Shepard saying that no, it's not just about the men. Leadership is not about men. It's actually about a way of life. What do you know about you, and how are you willing to give your best? Over and over again, I hope you did catch what I've been trying to tell you from the very beginning of my talk. Yeah, it all begins with you. It's all what Roseanne Barr is saying, what Helen Keller is saying, and what Kathleen Shepard is saying. And the good one to conclude my presentation today is by Diane Master Charles, saying that a woman is the full circle. Within her is the power to create, to nurture, and to transform. These particular attributes are very synonymous to us being women, are very stereotypical of us being women. It's in the DNA. That is how God created Eve with such pleasure of being gentle, nurturing, and hence within us is that power. It's a full circle. So on that note, here I am feeling very empowered, a woman as I am, empowered women to empower more women, inshallah. Thank you very much. I think my time is up. Thank you. Back to you, Associate Professor Dr. Yarina.
Okay, thanks very much, Professor Dr. Faiza, for a very captivating presentation. You begin your sharing session with sharing your experiences, and then Islamic perspective, cultural perspective, some prominent Venusian in education at the international level, and then sharing session about Venusian in Malaysia and higher education, in particular UiTM, and finally ended up with interesting quotes regarding the way forward. And this open for more debates and questions from the audience. We can see there's a lot of burning question, and if you look at the chat box, quite a number of questions for the audience. Please continue to write the question in the chat box, and we will answer the question during the Q&A session, probably around 12 p.m.
Okay, sure.
Thanks, Prof. Faiza.
You're most welcome.
Okay, let's move to the second sharing session from a group of researchers from RMIT Australia, RMIT University Australia. We have three panels. Professor Denise Cuthbert, Associate Professor Ceridwen Spark, and Dr. Leul Tadesse Sidelil. All right, before we begin, allow me to read their brief information. We have Prof. Denise here.
Hi, Yarina. Hello, everybody.
Hi, Prof. Denise. How are you?
Really well.
Let me introduce Prof. Denise Cuthbert. She was my former supervisor back then at Monash University, an outstanding supervisor, and I love her very much. Okay, Professor Denise is a senior academic and higher education leader with over 30 years experience in all aspects of higher education. Her particular expertise lies in research training and development and guiding institutions in the process of research development and research intensification. In her current role as Assistant Deputy Vice Chancellor, Research Training and Development, Professor Cuthbert has overall responsibility for formal research training through research masters and PhD programs at RMIT in Melbourne. She also contributes to the research strategy of the university and a range of developmental activities focused on groups including early career researchers and research supervisors or advisors. Professor Cuthbert also has expertise in gender, equity and inclusion. She currently co-chairs the VC Advisory Committee on Gender Violence, has participated in Athena Swan process and is the developer of the Respectful Research Training Professional Development Program through the Australian Council of Graduate Research. Let me introduce the second panel as well. Associate Professor Ceridwen Spark is currently an Associate Professor and a lecturer at Global and Language Studies, Global, Urban and Social Studies at RMIT University, Melbourne, Australia. Associate Professor Spark was the Vice Chancellor Senior Research Fellow, Social and Global Studies Centre, RMIT, Melbourne from 2015 to 2019. She is an active researcher who has received quite a number of research grants and very active in publications, including books and monographs. And we are also glad to have Dr. Leul Tadesse Sidelil, who is currently a research assistant at School of Graduate Research at RMIT University. Dr. Sidelil was formerly the Dean of Institute of Education and Behavioral Sciences, Ambo University in Ethiopia from 2012 to 2016, a lecturer of the Institute of Education and Behavioral Sciences, again at Ambo University from 2003 to 2016, and was also the head of the Department of Pedagogical Sciences at Ambo University, Ethiopia in 2006 to 2009. All right, without further ado, let us welcome Associate Professor Spark, Dr. Sidelil, and Professor Cuthbert to share their thoughts on power and empowerment through higher education perspective from Ethiopia, Papua New Guinea, and Australia, thinking through SDG5. The virtual podium is all yours, Prof. and Associate Professor.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Yarina. It's a pleasure to be here. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, great. So we need to get moving because we've got quite a lot to talk about in the next little while. I'm just going to turn off my video so that it doesn't distract me, and Leul is also going to be helping me with navigating the PowerPoint. So today, as mentioned, we're going to focus our discussion on SDG5, which, as you may know, is achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Our discussion is focused on higher education, so we could equally have considered gendered empowerment in this setting through the lens of SDG4, which is a focus on education. But we decided to use SDG5 and take the figure of the tertiary educated woman as our collective model for thinking about empowerment. And it's probably worth giving you a bit of a warning that our talk is much more focused on structural constraints that women experience and is probably a bit of a grimmer picture than the one that we just heard around the focus on individual attainment and attributes. So I apologise for being a bit more pessimistic in our view. So there's ample evidence to suggest that in the language of aid and development, the figure of the tertiary educated woman is the new hero and saviour, representing the pinnacle of success and modernity. She's assumed to have transcended, or at least be on the way to overcoming, the disadvantages of her gender. Furthermore, she's expected to be able to play a key role in multiplying her advantage for the benefit of others. So offering a critique of SDG5 from a feminist perspective, we're informed particularly by intersectional, post-colonial and third world feminism. The purpose of our talk is not to determine whether SDG5 can itself be considered a success or failure. Rather, our objective is to shed light on the limits of it in relation to the aspirations of Agenda 2030 to be transforming the world. Specifically, we seek to explain that the transformative limitations of SDG5 arise from the reductive framing of gender empowerment, which draws on a technical and functional understanding of empowerment. So focusing on the lives and experiences of tertiary educated women, we'll be providing perspectives from three contexts: Ethiopia, Papua New Guinea and Australia. So the talk will go like this. I'll briefly reference the literature and then Leul will discuss research he's conducted in the tertiary sector in Ethiopia. I'll then reference some case studies from PNG, and finally Denise will reflect on the so-called more developed context of Australia before making some concluding remarks. Together, we argue that despite being an improvement on the MDGs, the SDGs failed to address the gendered power relationships and structures that underpin inequality. So if we can go to the next slide, please, Leul, that shows the literature. Most feminist scholars see the SDGs as having improved on the MDGs. There are some good reasons for this, which can be summarised as follows. SDGs have broadened the global development agenda to include environmental, social, economic and political concerns. In the process of formulation, there was much better engagement with member states and civil society, including feminist and women's rights organisations. And the SDGs broaden the scope of targets under SDG 5, ranging from discriminatory laws and harmful practices to violence against women, reproductive rights and participation in decision-making. But Agenda 2030 is critiqued by feminist scholars along the following lines. It's seen as lacking an integrated gender perspective and as favouring economic growth at the expense of addressing the structural drivers of women's subordination and oppression. Esquivel argues that Agenda 30's vision is not supported by strong enough language, clear means of implementation and policies or funding. And Foucault-Depart postulates that the states are most likely to neglect the goals and targets that address the need to challenge power relations, as these are the hardest to implement and achieve. And finally, Courant notes that responses to the SDG scorecard indicate, quote, that people across the globe view SDG 5 as the most ambitious, suggesting that attainment is viewed as improbable. So consequently, as Sen summarises, within the framework, the following questions remain, these questions here. Can deeply embedded social inequality be overcome through a focus on quantifiable measures and related policies? Will quantity become quality? We hold these critiques and Sen's question in mind as we examine our own research in three different contexts. So here we're just showing some of the slides which indicate the targets and indicators. And so as we proceed with the talk, we'll be filtering our case study discussion through these indicators. But I'll hand now to Leul, who's going to talk about his research in the Ethiopian context.
The instructor or things like they don't think can have questions or we are able to answer questions, it's very difficult. This is to her frustrations, and there were a lot of similar accounts from other students as well. So the pervasiveness of sexual harassment also severely restricted women's access to and use of academic and social places and spaces, as well as different forms of support services provided in these universities. Overall, campus environments are so hostile that female students don't feel safe and secure to use different spaces and service of the universities. That's why the overwhelming majority of the women students I interviewed do not go to TV rooms or sports fields, lounges, or even to their male instructors to seek academic help. The cumulative impact of such experience is significant. For instance, 12 out of 30 students, undergraduate students that I interviewed said they are considering leaving STEM once they graduate. This is obviously counterproductive to the goal of increasing women participation in higher education or even in STEM disciplines and workforces. So similar problems were also shared by academic women. Although these women are qualified and made it to STEM academic by their, she said that most of my female colleagues didn't believe me when I told them my grades. I'm here because of the affirmation when your colleagues look down on you, although you can even be sometimes better than most of them. So another academic woman was also asked how she managed to have high grades in her undergraduate and postgraduate studies by one of the men who interviewed her for the job. So alongside these disrespectful experiences, women also have very limited access to much needed formal and informal networks and collaborations in academia. This, along with challenges of double burden, entailed as a result of the gendered expectations about women's domestic and child caring roles, considerably restrict their participation in research leadership within university. This in turn severely impacts their equitable career progression as academics. So academic women in leadership positions also have similar challenges, like that of the academics and the students. So one of the academics I interviewed had previously been the director of gender for one of the universities. Describing her experience of misrecognition in the university senate and management committee meetings, she told me that some members of the senate always think that I raise my hands to speak only about gender issues. They don't think I have opinion on other issues. Sometimes I see some of them smiling even before I say something. I don't usually speak much in these meetings because when I do, they tend to judge me and even sometimes say annoying things, or sometimes they even ignore me. So she became fed up and at the end resigned from the gender office. This outcome makes clear that it is important to question the adequacy of just increasing women's participation in leadership and managerial positions, such as those targets stated in the fifth goal, without duly problematizing the many barriers and prejudices that they continue to face while they are in these roles. As I said earlier, the existing policies are largely silent on problems that are actively producing and reproducing inequalities in STEM universities. One of the ramifications of this policy silence is that it masks or it condones the gendered nature of universities and presents the universities as gender-neutral spaces. By so doing, it ignores and obscures the structural and cultural barriers that actively produce and reproduce inequalities within these universities. So overall, the problem with the national development programs, these problems with the national development programs echo those of the SDG's transformation agenda. Despite the appeal of increasing the number of women in STEM, for example, real change cannot be achieved without changing the structure and culture that are actively producing or that underpin the existing gender relations that characterize society and higher education institutions. So as a feminist, as the feminist philosopher Nancy Fraser argues, transformative change or substantive change requires political praxis that aims to dismantle or unsettle the structure and culture that actively produces and reproduces inequality within these universities. So thank you very much. This is all I have. Back to you, Cuthbert.
Thank you, Leul. So now I will turn to discuss my research in PNG. In 2007, I travelled to Papua New Guinea to interview tertiary educated women about their lives. There, I met Marie, a 25-year-old law graduate. When asked to consider whether she had a role model or person she admired, Marie said, "Yes, I saw an expatriate woman at the airport once when I was about 6 years old. She was in charge of some men and she looked very powerful in her red suit." Marie remembered this woman carrying a two-way radio on which she was issuing orders, while at the same time telling a group of guys what to do. She said, "The image of her just stayed in my head. I wanted to be like her. I watched over the years, and I've learned that her career in the law has taken her to various countries in the Pacific and given her high levels of financial autonomy. In many respects, she represents the quintessential story of success within the narrative of gender, education and development." Thanks, Leul. Sorry. So what then are the SDG5 indicators that PNG can tick off that we might assume are supporting this success? The PNG Constitution, developed on the country's independence in 1975, provides a good legal and philosophical framework, calling for equal participation by women citizens in all political, economic, social and religious activities. Rape and assault have long been criminalised, and in 2013, the passing of the Family Protection Act specifically ruled against domestic violence and rape in marriage. Urban and educated women, like their male counterparts, communicate using mobile phones and the internet, with some debating women's rights and roles in drawing upon discourses of human rights and the goals of United Nations agencies. But what happens at the lives of these women in red suits? Does having some decent legislation and a mobile phone allow them to live lives free of violence? On the contrary. Indicators 5 on addressing violence by intimate partners, other violence and early marriage. In PNG, there's qualitative evidence to suggest that for women, education may in fact exacerbate the experience of violence because this state, Kroget Au state that intimate partner violence will be highest in societies where the status of women is in a state of transition. So they argue where women have a very low status, violence is not needed to enforce male authority. On the other hand, where women have a high status, they will probably have achieved sufficient power collectively to change traditional gender roles. Partner violence is thus usually highest in societies where the status of women is in a state of transition. Papua New Guinea can be understood as such a society. And as I have learned in my interviews over the years, there are various ways to keep tertiary educated women in their place. One is to beat them. Another is to harangue them relentlessly on their mobile phones when they're at work functions after hours. The tertiary educated women of violence, while also telling of Sebastian on returning home from work by her husband. He beat her because he was jealous and insecure about what she had achieved. Coming from a strongly patriarchal background, he felt that it was he and not her who should have had the opportunities for advancement that her education was giving her. So perhaps it doesn't take too much to question Indicator 5B.1, namely that simply putting a mobile phone in the hands of a woman equates to empowering her. Sure, she might experience new forms of freedom and power with that phone in hand, but as is the case in Australia, there is no sense in which relational dynamics that are mediated by phones take the gendered power relationships we see manifest in every aspect of culture and society. But sometimes it's harder for people to critique the idea that women having access to higher education is itself enough to transform power relationships. Indeed, as we've seen in relation to these cases in PNG, tracking these tertiary educated women's lives beyond the achievement of their prestigious and postgraduate degrees reveals a far more complex story, one of continued and in some cases exacerbated discrimination and violence. So we'll now turn to Denise's research, which is focused on the Australian context.
I was on mute. I just wanted to thank Yarina for the invitation, and also to thank my colleagues, Yarina and Leul, for the presentations they've made so far. And I now will just do an overview of the situation in Australia, which I think has got some very sobering, provides some very sobering insights, which further the argument about the limitations of education with respect to gender and empowerment. So the first thing that I would say is that at a high level and viewed from afar, Australia ticks many boxes. It's an affluent, advanced liberal democracy. We have had in place equal opportunity legislation for nearly 4 decades, and rather robust legislation with respect to sexual and gender harassment in the workplace, and so on. So what does the gender situation in Australian higher education actually look like? And the conclusion that we draw is that we have an increasingly feminised higher education sector, and there are lots of commonalities with Malaysia. But this feminisation has not reduced inequity. And so I've got in the bubbles on this slide some what I find to be pretty depressing data on what the now very high numbers of women in Australian higher education, how they're actually travelling in terms of equitable considerations. So we find, for example, that 51% of level A staff, level A in the Australian precarious employment, are also dominated by women. So we have our Malaysian colleague earlier talked about female vice-chancellors in the Malaysian higher education sector. And I would point out that we have 26% of Australian vice-chancellors who are female, which is better than 10%. But as I alluded earlier, we have had equal opportunity legislation at Commonwealth and state level in Australia for now 40 years, and 26% is a long way from parity. Even more sobering, only 25% of Australian academic women attain a level above senior lecturer. So once again, that just confirms that picture of an increasingly feminised workforce, but females concentrated in the lower levels of the profession, with a mere 26% of Australian vice-chancellors being female. This feminisation question can be seen through other lenses as well. Australian women and girls are 8%. With respect to bachelor's degree, the awarding of bachelor degrees or higher, 44.5% of Australian women aged between 25 and 29 have a bachelor degree or higher, which compares with 32.2% of men. So we are seeing women moving into higher education, achieving qualifications, but we're not yet seeing women break through to the highest ranks in the academy, and we still see women. And I'm just going to move to the next slide. Of course, higher education is seen as a great enabler of economic independence, and hence the emphasis placed on women accessing education in order to achieve economic independence. But when we look at the persistence of gender pay gaps, we start to see, if you like, the less optimistic side of this story. We are certainly putting more and more women through degrees at bachelor's level and also at postgraduate level. They are moving as qualified graduates into various fields of work in increasing numbers, but we are still seeing the persistence of gender pay gaps. And what I find really depressing about this particular slide is that I have the gender pay gap is pretty well ubiquitous across all sectors, all industries, and all professions. I've selected here 3 professions in which we have a high proportion both of women studying in education and also in the labour force, and notwithstanding the concentrations of women in these fields, in fact, their feminisation, particularly nursing and social work, the gender pay gap persists. So it's not simply a case of women in Australia experiencing a gender pay gap when they move into male-dominated fields. We even see it in the professions which are actually highly feminised. Now that really talks to a series and a syndrome of structural constraints which cut across considerations of the abilities of the individual women to pursue education and careers. So Ceridwen told a wonderful story from her research about the powerful image of the woman in the red suit as a kind of role model for the young Papuan woman who went on and studied a law degree. And it's quite interesting to take this is a very brief high-level snapshot of the legal profession in Australia. Women are entering law degrees at a very, very high rate. In fact, law degrees across Australian universities are increasingly feminised, and I think that there are almost, they've exceeded, women law students have exceeded parity with their qualifications, which are meant to enable careers and economic independence and equitable opportunity with their male peers. But we find that the barriers are still there. So once again, we have a gender pay gap in the law profession of over 35%. Or between 23% and 35%. We have, some of the, only 1/3 of women in Australia's top law firms move into partnerships. Sorry, only 25%. In partnerships. It's a little bit like the rate at which senior Australian female academics attain vice chancellorships. Merely 10% of the senior positions in Australian legal profession belong to female lawyers, and in the area of appointments to the courts in various jurisdictions in relation to the Commonwealth, that number has only shifted by 12%. So women are very, very underrepresented in the senior ranks of the profession, in the partnerships of leading law firms, and on the benches of courts in the Commonwealth jurisdiction. So, for example, in the federal courts, the ratio of male to female judges and justices is 3:1. So as you're aware, SDG5 looks closely at via a whole range of indicators as to the capacity of education to be an enabler of equality. And women's personal safety and their safety from sexual harassment is a key consideration here. And to echo comments made by my colleagues earlier, one of our critiques of SDG5 is that it seems to assume that education and educational institutions are somehow a neutral space into which women can move, attain education, attain empowerment and economic independence and go on to have lives with greater opportunity than without that education. But our research in Ethiopia, in Papua New Guinea, and sadly also in Australia shows that far from being neutral zones, educational institutions themselves are highly gendered, and women are not safe from gender-based violence or sexual harassment within our universities and indeed our other colleges. So, for example, the Australian Human Rights Commission undertook a major survey of sexual harm on Australian university campuses in 2015-2016, publishing the landmark report, Change the Course, in 2017, which really placed a very concerning spotlight on gender-based violence as experienced by the students in Australian higher education. Not to be unduly alarmist, the rates of gender-based violence and sexual harassment were not higher than those in the broader community. They were at the same level, but this itself is alarming because the rates of gender-based violence and sexual harassment in Australian society at large are quite high. The Change the Course report focused on students' experiences of violence, sexual violence and sexual harassment, and there are a couple of noteworthy observations to make. With respect to undergraduate students, the greatest risk they faced was from sexual harassment and sexual violence from other students. But when we move into research, the higher levels of study, research degrees and professional master's degrees, the students reported facing sexual violence and sexual harassment, not from their fellow students, but from faculty. A great deal less is known about the experiences of women working in Australian higher education. This area is under-researched. There are a couple of small studies, and I'd point, for example, to a report by the Women's History Network, which was published in 2018, which highlights experiences of sexual harassment and gender violence, predominantly in the field of history in Australian universities, but there are certainly women participating in that survey from a range of other fields. One of the things that the work that has been done to date in this field has highlighted is that this is something like a dirty little secret in Australian higher education, where the use of non-disclosure agreements in managing cases of misconduct by high-profile staff mean that it's very, very hard for us to get accurate figures on the rate at which harassment is actually taking place. And finally, I'd just draw attention to another very large piece of work which was published in 2018 called Respect at Work, which is a further report by the Australian the Equal Opportunity Commission on the rate of sexual harassment and gender discrimination in Australian workplaces across all sectors. And there are many reports in that final volume referencing higher education. But one of the interesting things there is that piece of work also perpetuates this assumption that we see in the SDGs that the role of higher education institution is to educate future gender bias are eliminated from the workplaces of the future, and doesn't adequately recognise the point that we're making in our criticism that higher education institutions themselves are gendered and are places where some of these behaviours are in fact perpetrated rather than being neutral. So as Ceridwen pointed out, ours is certainly a grimmer picture than that presented by the earlier speaker. And I just need to make some kind of clarifying comments here. By presenting this grimmer picture, we are not in any way disputing that women lack capability and drive and shouldn't seize every opportunity they can to advance themselves. Our point is that we need to be cognizant that there still remain some very, very serious structural barriers to women achieving their full potential. So I guess the conclusions that we make and the questions that we would ask by way of winding up this presentation is to observe that education is absolutely necessary, but it's insufficient to drive gender equality. Education, and indeed education institutions, are not gender neutral, and they will not achieve gender equality without themselves being reconstituted in gender equitable and inclusive ways. The burden of doing the hard cultural work of transformation is left to women. This represents a further gendered burden borne by women. You will all be familiar with the term the double shift, that is the women who work long hours in the workplace, like Ceridwen's example from Papua New Guinea, then to go home to the domestic shift at home. We're suggesting that there's a kind of triple shift. Women have to do their work, they have to do the housework when they get home, but they also have to do the cultural change work of driving gender equity in their workplaces. And I would just hazard a guess, given the topic under discussion today, that the vast majority of attendees at this symposium are women. This is the work that we do on top of our day jobs and on top of the work that we do when we go home. And the other observations, quite soberingly, which particularly come from the Australian case example, is that the levels of education themselves do not guarantee wage equality. And as Ceridwen points out with respect to her PNG examples, education doesn't guarantee freedom from gender-based violence. In fact, educated women in Papua New Guinea are more liable to be subject to violence because of their education. So in this respect, as we advance women's equality, we need to also have strategies for dealing with the bias and the backlash. So in short, we have a long way to go. Thanks so much for your attention.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Denise Cuthbert. Thank you very much, Professor Denise Cuthbert, Professor Ceridwen Spark, and Dr. Sidelil for very fruitful, insightful presentation on power and empowerment through higher education perspective from Ethiopia, Papua New Guinea, and Australia. A very long way to go, as what Prof. Denise mentioned, and a very interesting, argument, important argument raised by your team, especially when you suggested that SDG fails to adequately address the gender power relationship and structure, and higher education and its institution are gendered. Okay, and this again open for more debates and question from our participants. Can we move to the question and answer session? We have quite a number of questions in the chat box. Shall I read the question and to ask to the panel? Maybe we can start with the first question from Muhammad Anwar Fahmi. Not only Muhammad Anwar Fahmi raised quite a number of questions here. Why male students are less prominent in academics than female students in Malaysia? And maybe we can also combine the question on, do you agree with me that the huge population of female teachers will affect the competencies of male students in education system? Okay. In education system, and can you please relate your answer from the psychology school of thought? Maybe I can pass this question to Professor Dr. Faiza.
Okay, thank you, Associate Professor Dr. Yarina, for the two questions from our colleague. Thank you, sir, for asking. I didn't get the name. Can you tell me the name, Dr. Yarina?
Muhammad Anwar Fahmi Haridas
Okay.
bin
Okay,
Abdullah.
thank you, Muhammad Anwar Fahmi, for the beautiful questions. The two questions are very pertinent for us to discuss this morning, also reaching afternoon. The first one, you were wondering what is happening to our boys. Yeah, they are not performing well at school. I would start by saying that there have been many research done in the years. Despite research after research being conducted, findings have confirmed some of the possible factors, yet similar trend happen year by year. So I would, if you were to ask me, let me reinstate again, and this is actually based on my personal observation. It does not reflect the faculty that I'm in or the Ministry of Education. This is based on my own observation and the readings. What I notice is that, with the experience that I have observing how teachers teach, and also the things that I studied when I looked at the textbook, the assignments that they give students, and the assessment, the big public examination that we make our students sit for. What I noticed is that there is some typical activities which actually would be an advantage to the girls as opposed to the boys with regard to how girls are prone to learn, how they prefer to learn, the learning styles and their learning strategies, which are actually in favor of how the teaching and learning activities are done at school and the kind of assessment that we seek for. I mean, I think it is quite safe for me to conclude that some of the questions that we have tend to be of memorizing, tend to be of reinstating facts, and girls are good at memorizing, whereas boys, as we know, they are good at hands-on. They like to model. They like to demonstrate. However, questions, a heavier weightage is not given to those type of questions. Heavier weightage is given to questions that require retrieval of stored information in the long-term memory. And we know the DNA of girls tend to bookish. Yeah? We like to read. We here as in girls. So I suppose if you were to ask me, one of the obvious reasons that we have identified, even research after research have also confirmed, in fact, there's a discourse research cognitive application. And it's only off late that the ministry and the examination board have decided to revise the format of examination by including a practical aspect, by including higher order thinking questions where students have to write essays to give their opinions based on writing. The psychology aspect of girls versus boys, when it comes to verbal, when it comes to spoken language, the girls are better off than the boys in general speaking. Yeah, I'm not saying because they have the empirical data. So back to your question, the first one, why is there more girls performing well and boys are not performing so well? I think that is why. The teaching and learning activities are prone towards what is suiting to the girls as opposed to the boys. And then the assessment, the questions that we have in our examination papers are favorable to how the girls learn, and because it's basically a lot of memorization. But slowly I repeat myself, slowly we can see that the Ministry of Education is changing how we give to our public. For higher order thinking, no more memorizing. But then again, my hunch is that because boys, they don't like to write as opposed to talk, as opposed to demonstrating, as opposed to modeling, as opposed to hands-on, I think the figure could still remain where girls may perform better than boys. That's number one. And then the next question is, could it be because of there are more female teachers compared to male teachers at school? Again, I would say it's all, what do we actually measure? You know, how do we actually measure? How do we differentiate performance in terms of academic? So it goes back to that. If our yardstick is based on cognitive achievement, is based on, you know, memorizing facts, then whether it's female or male, that teachers being dominant at school, that's not the point. But if our yardstick of measuring what is academic performance, I think slowly we are coming into holistic education. And it's not just about knowing the theories, but it's also about applying, it's also about evaluating and coming up, creating something new out of that. Then maybe we can see the difference. But our examination or our yardstick to gauge the performance of academic performance of our children, of our students, is very cognitive like that. I anticipate the trend will still be the same. It has got nothing to do with there are more female teachers than there are more male teachers. It's actually what teachers are doing in the class. If the teachers are so oriented to exam and then drilling students on what is the best answers, how do you model answers, this is how you answer this, and then give a lot of, in Malay we call it latih to be, a lot of drilling the students than the girls actually. So I hope I've answered the two questions from you, Saudara Fahmi. Thank you. Back to you, Dr. Yarina.
Thank you very much, Faiza, Professor Dr. Faiza. One important question from Professor Denise Cuthbert. She's leaving soon. Maybe we can ask Prof. Denise's capability in doing works or something, especially involving young women in job sector, and how to promote gender equality in the patriarchal society.
Thank you. Yarina, can you repeat the first part of that question?
Why is it orthodox stigma still exists until now? For example, like underestimate women's capability in doing work.
I don't know, Yarina. There's a very good colleague at RMIT who's a feminist mathematician, and she's done some calculations, and she says, this is with respect to the Australian scene, if we continue to advance at the current rate across all indicators like gender pay gap and other things, we may achieve genuine equality in about 450 years. So, you know, I think what the issue here is that we have deeply ingrained gendered assumptions about capability. We have deeply ingrained assumptions about the attributes of men versus women. We see this playing out in the STEM space, where we have very, very low participation rates in Australia of women and girls in STEM. The STEM labour force in Australia is 14% female, so it's less than 20%. And people will still say, women are not good at maths. Boys are better at, boys are more suited to maths and disciplines like engineering. These things, they really cling and they really stay, and they need to be completely dismantled. And the education plays a part, but it has to be more broadly based. The whole of society has to contribute to this. And the point that I made towards the end of that presentation is that largely, so for example, I chair the Vice-Chancellor's Advisory Committee on Gender-Based Violence, which is one of the initiatives out of the Human Rights Commission report to try and reduce sexual harassment and gender violence on campus. Overwhelmingly, the membership of that committee is women. Women care about this work. Generally speaking, men do not. Until both men and women agree that this is a problem, we're not going to shift it. I'm very heartened to see some of the statistics coming out of Malaysia, and I'm very, very hopeful that, Malaysia may have solutions and strategies that they can teach us in Australia, because we don't have the answers.
Well, I do agree with you. Maybe Prof. Faiza would like to add some feedback on that regarding the attributes of yes.
Why is this gender disparity still a stigma, and why is it that men are more obvious in certain discipline as opposed to women? And I suppose we could also relate that to what we were talking about earlier when it comes to academic performance. Why is it that the girls outdo the boys? I suppose if you recall what I have been trying to mention from the very beginning of my talk, now I said it begins with us. If you want to see that change, it begins with yourself. And if you believe that is the stigma, then it is the stigma, unless you want to change that. Again, it goes by your own confidence as a woman. And hence also with the ability to rise to the occasion by, go and get that opportunity. It's there, it's for you to take. But as long as women themselves wouldn't want to, move, then no one's going to make you move. And another thing is that I think in many countries across the globe, there have been incentives, initiatives, policies that support women to really, prosper in leadership roles and also in playing their part in relevant industries. But I suppose because of the data that we have observed from the relevant countries, we are still quite far away from there, and more need to be done. Yes, they can facilitate us. The government could provide relevant policies, develop policies, provide funding, give us financial assistance here and there, training that we would require, we here as being women. But if we do not rise to the occasion, nobody could actually, whatever that the government would have done will not be relevant and productive at the end of the day. So the stigma begins with us. We need to be that change. If we want to see the change happening in the world, it begins with us. Start that change with us. Prove that we are of no difference. Prove the fact that we are also, capable in the respective discipline. Yes, there are certain DNAs which are very attributable to the female and attributable to the male. But then again, what's stopping us? Because we have seen women in conquering in the discipline that was dominated by men, that is dominated by men. So there's nothing stopping. Again, I would say the simple answer to that is actually begins with us. If we want to stay where we are and we are comfortable where we are, I don't think that's going to make any difference, regardless of what policy, regardless of what the government or UNESCO even want to come up with certain policy or even funding, training that there is there for us to grab. But if we're still sitting there and believing that is the stigma, then nothing's going to change. Thank you.
Yarina?
Yes, Prof. Denise.
Yarina, with apologies, my Australian colleagues and I need to go now.
Sure.
It's been a pleasure and a privilege to participate in this discussion, and we hope that our presentation has been of value, and we wish you every success in pursuing diversity and equality at UITM. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof.
All right, very interesting feedback from both experts, Professor Denise Cuthbert and Professor Dr. Faizah. Well, it's still a long way to go, but again, it goes back to us, like what Prof. Faizah said. Whatever challenges, whatever stigma you have, if you don't overcome yourself, then how come you're going to talk about moving towards your career development or whatsoever? Thanks very much, Prof. Let's move to the next question. Maybe one question for Dr. Sidelil. How to stop or break gender stereotype? And maybe you can relate with the examples from Ethiopia, because from your sharing, there's a lot of issues on the stereotypes exist in higher education, among higher education students. Is Dr. Sidelil still here?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, the question is very difficult, and I'm afraid I don't have the answer. There is no way, I don't know at least a way to break the stereotypes or tackle the problems that comes that create stereotypes. But probably what I would suggest is for everybody, especially for policymakers and university leaders in the context of higher education, to look into the policies and the programs that they're putting in place to address this issue. Basically, in a way, how we define the problem. And if we look back for like decades, it's been, I mean, many decades since the issue of gender equality has been discussed in policy, in higher education policies. So probably it's time to stop making women the source of the problem and to start to rethink the way that we make women the source of the problem and also the target of the solution. Usually, most of the policies and most of the discussions usually focus on fixing the women. For example, in case of STEM, it's common to hear people to talk about, enhancing the awareness of women and girls about STEM, supporting them through different academic programs and so on. All this assume that the problem, there is something to do with women. The source of the problem are women themselves. So it's time to shift this focus and start to think about what is the university doing, what are the men in the universities, the structure, the culture doing in producing and reproducing these problems. So probably then we will start to directly treat and attack the source of the problem instead of focusing on the victims of the problem. So if you look into most of the policies, especially these quantifiable policy targets, usually they tend to focus on women, increasing their number, increasing their awareness. This kind of programs usually assume that there is something wrong with the women. So my suggestion will be it's time to stop and start to rethink about the direction of our policies and interventions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sidelil. I do agree when you said that how do we see the problem? How do we see the problem? If we see the problem is the woman, then we have to start thinking how to fix the woman. If we see the problem is in terms of gender equality, maybe in higher education, the institution need to play their roles. There's a lot of yes, Prof. Please, Prof. Dr. Faiza.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Ceridwen, for your opinion sharing. I do agree with you, and if I may add, why do we always begin by looking at it as a problem? Why is it that we always look at the fact that these are actually issues with the women? No doubt there is always these policies and there is always this financial aid to support the women to prosper. But if we start looking at it as that's an issue, that's a problem, then it will always forever be issues and problems. I like to recall what I said earlier when I quoted John Gray. Yeah? We're talking about, yes, there are differences between men and women, but if we are able to embrace those differences, and that is where love can blossom. So in other words, if I may say that, we need to recognize we do have differences. Who are we here to deny that we are the same? We are not the same. We need to realize we are different, but does not mean being different we are any less. That is where the problem arises. When you hear women, when we think that we are different from the men and we are disprivileged, we are underprivileged, we are sidelined. Who gave that notion? It begins with you. So if you consider the policies or the financial aids are there to solve the problem, it's not about problem, it's about opportunities. These are opportunities. So I hope you guys see what I'm trying to tell you. Do not see it as a problem, see it as an opportunity. Do not see it as us being privileged, see that as more rooms for us to explore. There are opportunities. We can change that statistic, but the statistic says because we did not make that change. So that is what I wanted to say, Dr. Yarina. Always see that differences make us stronger. How do we become stronger? Embrace the differences, accept the differences, and never deny that we are different. Because we are. But it does not mean that when we are different, we are less able. That's not true. Thank you. Back to you, Dr. Yarina.
Okay. Thanks very much, Prof. Very what do you call empowering statement by you, and especially when you trying to see the things as opportunity, as a positive side, which begins with individual, and then with the support of the policy and the institution, it will make us get more what we want. As you said, we cannot deny that we are different, but what can we do to make changes? Otherwise, the statistic won't change. But again, the policy plays important roles as well, and individual plays its role as well. And maybe we can have one more question from Dr. Fadila in terms of women participation rate in labour force in Ethiopia. In terms of, because in Malaysia the rate is 55%. Can you please share about this, Dr. Sidelil? Okay, maybe there's some problem with Dr. Sidelil's connection. Maybe one last question, Prof. Faiza. But before that, Dr. Iqbal, Dr. Iqbal, I hope that you and other authorities will be able to stop gender-based violence. Again, go back to individual as well in the support from the national, international level. But question that I would like to ask Prof. Faiza is, the female students dominated in most all courses in higher education. The rate is 67, but why the high rate in higher education does not equally represented in labour force participation? What caused this scenario?
Thank you. I like this question. It's a good challenge. Yes, there are more female students in the university. In other words, there are also more female graduates from the university. But then again, when we talk about labour force, what happened to the ladies? Because if we refer to the ILO report, 2021, 55% ladies, if I got it right. Now, if you recall just now, Professor Denise talked about triple shift. Yeah, it's not just about double shift, it's also triple shift. And I would like to relate that to one of my slides where I mentioned about the cultural perspective when it comes, when a woman is faced with a dilemma between work and family, family is always first. You know, it's always a generic findings. It's empirical. Yeah, it has been done many times, research, and they've already confirmed that is it from a cultural perspective because of the culture value. And then Carthom and friends findings also just now confirmed that when it comes to self-fulfillment, you know, a woman when it is also embraced and celebrated by the family. So again, family is always first for the women. So when, and I'm sure most of us here are academics, and you would have known or still keeping in touch with your ex-students who are now in the workforce, and you might be able to talk to your students who graduated but prefer to stay at home as a housewife. Then you will try to understand why is that happening. And the way I look at it is that because they also see their role as the mother, as the wife. And in a society where, you know, we're talking about raising a child is not easy, it takes a village to raise a child. Eh? So there are some sacrifices made by women. And of course, men I've always seen that as the breadwinner. It's like what do you call that? The jargon given to men, yeah, a technical jargon or term, always coined as the breadwinner. And women have been seen as, again, it's because of culture. And it's also because of the society, the norm of the society. So why are there less women at the workforce despite the fact there are more female graduates and female students? I suppose one of it is because of this orientation towards the role they play the moment they are married. That's number one. And number two, for working women, they have been researched and empirical data to support this. When they work, the children care, the daycare, the child care, if the organization does not come in with certain perks that support the women at the same time, daycare, having a daycare facility nearby or in the organization, there's always been an issue for the ladies. So that is why if you visit certain ministries in Malaysia, you will see on the ground floor there is this daycare where the staff can send their babies, their toddlers there, or transit between schools and for the children. Why is that happening? Because they wanted to support the female staff. That's simply understanding that had that not been provided, they might just quit their job. So again, there are reasons, and there have been research to confirm this. Because why do we have less female in the workforce as opposed to men? The third shift is a challenge to them, and when they are challenged, when they are pushed to the brink, it's always family first. That is what I could think of at the moment, Dr. Yarina. Back to you, Dr. Yarina.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Maybe we can end the session again. I would like to highlight one important feedback from the Facebook. Panimala Subramaniam, educative information, women are the best. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now come to the end of the webinar. Thank you very much to Professor Dr. Faiza and research group from RMIT. On behalf of the committee, IBSD, Professor Zul, our director, we would like to extend our gratitude to all panelists for the outstanding insight, which I believe will benefit all. To all participants, we would like to thank you for your participant and engagement, very active engagement. Please register your name to receive it for the attendance. And if you have further question, you can email to us or email directly to the panelists. I really happy listening to Prof. Faizah and other speakers sharing session. I feel like I look for more opportunities after this. Very positive thinking, Prof. Thank you very much to all. I end this session with Assalamualaikum and have a good day to all. See you all at our next SDG virtual series session.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you so much, yeah? And my regards to Prof. Zul. Bye.
Assalamualaikum.